I'm almost 40, and I've actually really enjoyed reaching this age. It feels very liberating. You know, I've had my kids. I'm not as worried about the way I look. And having children, you do realize you can hold so much more in your brain. It's like beyond your work and your life and this and that. You're like thinking about all these things for them all the time. And even though there's, you know, what's mom brain, which I think people find derogatory, I think it's kind of positive. It's like you're a little foggy, but you're remembering way more than most people because you're just thinking in a different way.
Yeah. I kind of like to think of it as your brain's keeping so many lines of a train running cross intersections in all sorts of ways. So foggy, I think, just doesn't come close really to what our brains are doing. I wonder though if you can end for us, because even though parenting is hard, your book really brings out the beauty and the fun that comes with parenting. And I know you and your kids love to have dance parties to Queen before bedtime. Let's listen. I love this. What does that moment mean at the end of your day?
Oh, it's the best feeling in the world. I always say whenever things are kind of not going right at home, we have a dance party. Just being with my kids and playing music and dancing around, it always brings to light what I feel like is most important.
Artist Lauren Brantz, her new book is called Poems of Parenting. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
Hi, I'm Alonzo Bowden from Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I'm a car guy. I'm so into cars, I change cars like people change shoes. I figure over my lifetime, that's cost me probably gross domestic product of New Zealand. Listen, when it's time for you to trade up, think about this station. Your old car could pay for Morning Edition or Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. So come on, turn your old ride into the programs you love. Here's how.
For more information, go to our website, radioiq.org.
Singapore is one of the busiest cities in the world, but biologist Philip Johns is fascinated by a different inhabitant on the island.
At rush hour downtown, the otters would swim toward each other, and there are literally tens of thousands of people who are on their way to work.
How ideas, emotions, and creatures coexist. That's next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR.
Tuesday evenings at 8 and Saturday afternoons at 2 on Radio IQ.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And the Mehrotra Institute for Business, Markets, and Society, hosting the Is Business Broken podcast, featuring conversations with academics, industry leaders, and politicians. More at ibms.bu.edu.
It's Here and Now. Funding cuts are coming for a big research program on cancer. The spending bill just passed has no funds for kidney cancer, pancreatic, lung research, and less for breast, ovarian, and prostate. Taken together with other cuts, experts say screening and treatment programs are threatened at a time of big breakthroughs. Angus Chen reports for our editorial partner STAT, the health and medicine publication. Angus, welcome back.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Your story focuses on a very deadly cancer, pancreatic cancer, and the impacts of the funding cuts. First of all, what progress are we making on pancreatic cancer?
Yeah, pancreatic cancer is a really tough cancer to treat, but it's had a lot of advances in the last few years. There are a number of companies that are creating next-generation targeted therapies for pancreatic cancer that actually aren't just good for pancreatic cancer, they're good for a lot of other cancer types as well. On top of that, we're seeing advances in cancer vaccines for this cancer. We're seeing advances in biomarkers and screening technologies that come in the form of blood tests or multi-cancer screening technologies. So it's a really exciting time for pancreatic cancer, and those in the field are thrilled with what might come for patients with this cancer in the next few years.
And as you report, Angus, right, the percentage of patients still low, but those who survive longer term is going up. And then, as you report, there's more than a 50% budget cut to a key military science research program. How might that impact this pancreatic cancer research?
So one of the things to know about pancreatic cancer is there aren't a lot of dedicated funding sources for this cancer to begin with. So this defense program that you just mentioned, it's called the CDMRP. It was one of the most important dedicated funding sources for pancreatic cancer. But it also funds a lot of other hard to treat cancers, including lung cancer research and a certain kind of brain cancer research called glioblastoma. Unfortunately, there was a spending plan that I was able to review that said that all of these dedicated funding sources for some of these cancers will get $0 in funding for fiscal year 2025. That's going to have a huge blow on these fields.
As you write, Angus, impacting scientists in the field, people trying to get their first jobs in this field. But let me ask you about cancer patients who are right now in clinical trials, trying out cutting-edge treatments. Some of them have advanced cancers, and you're right about some of these patients. Some trials, I gather, have stopped.
Yeah, so there are some patients that are reporting that they've gone to their clinical trials and they've tried to continue their treatment on a trial and found that they were unable to do so because of delays or cuts to their funding. The thing with particularly late stage cancer patients is that they often have gone through all of the standard of care options for them. You know, they've done the chemotherapy, they've done surgery, radiation, other things, targeted drugs that are out there, and they still have cancer, right? They still need another option. And a lot of time, the only place they can get that option is a clinical trial. Without those options, after you've gone through the chemotherapy, after you've gone through your standard of care options, what do you have left? Unfortunately, it's nothing, right? And unfortunately, it means that they'll die for many of them.
Angus, this is your beat, and you report on what is happening with cancer research, the progress on screening and treatments and therapies and surgeries. Given the budget cuts that you're talking about and the uncertainty for funding through the National Institutes of Health, what does this mean for the big cancer research centers in this country?
Yeah, so the 73 cancer centers that are designated by the National Cancer Institute, they rely on these grants to help their scientists do their work, to do research, to do clinical trials. And more than anything else, they rely on this stream of funding called the indirect costs from these grants. That's like the lights, the certain kinds of equipment, buildings, shared lab supplies, stuff like that, all count towards indirect costs. And I think that's what the cancer centers are the most concerned about. Where will this cost rate fall? And they're worried that it'll fall to a number that's just simply too low to keep up the rate of research that we have right now.
Angus, for the longest time, federal money for cancer was kind of untouchable. And as you report, you keep hearing the word devastating from people in this field. Just briefly tell us a little bit more about the reaction you're getting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people felt blindsided by how big and sudden these cuts came. Cancer research has been something that I think, I hear this all the time, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, everybody gets cancer, right? And everyone understands what that means, the kind of impact it can have on a person and their family. If there are such drastic cuts to continue going through, it means we'll have a lot less cancer research in this country. We'll have a lot fewer trial options like we talked about, and we'll have a lot fewer scientists, brilliant young scientists deciding to go into this field and pursuing it here in the United States. That's something I think a lot of scientists and researchers and patients and advocates said, they were worried was a kind of damage that would take us a very long time to recover from.
That's Angus Chen, cancer reporter at STAT, the health and medicine publication. Angus, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Here and Now is a production of NPR and WBUR. I'm Scott Tong in Washington, D.C.
invite all who desire to stand for a moment of silence or personal prayer and to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you and amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon and welcome to our meeting for March 25th, 2025. Regular meetings are held on the second and fourth Tuesday at 2 p.m. Public hearings are held at 6 p.m. on the fourth Tuesday of each month. Deviations from this schedule will be announced. The meetings are broadcast live on RVTV Channel 3 and will be rebroadcast on Friday at 7 p.m. and on Sunday from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. Board of Supervisors meetings can also be viewed online through Roanoke County's website at www.roanokecountyva.gov. Individuals who require assistance or special arrangements to participate in or attend the Board of Supervisors meetings should contact the clerk to the board at 540-772-2005 and at least 48 hours in advance. Gentle reminder, please turn off all your cell phones or place them in silence during a meeting. We move to item A, opening ceremonies. One, a roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Hooker?
Here.
Mr. North?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Here.
Mr. Radford?
Here. We move to item B, request to postpone, add to, or change the order of agenda items. Fellow board members, do you have any changes?
No, sir.
Oh, no, sir. Okay. Mr. Kaywood?
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lubick?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It has been proposed that we add as a new business item D1, a resolution authorizing the execution of documents in connection with certain general obligation school bonds that were previously purchased by the Virginia Public School Authority. And this matter would be presented by Lori Gerhardt.
Okay, thank you. Are there any objections by my fellow board members?
Oh,
No objection.
Okay, seeing none, the agenda is amended as proposed. We move to item C, briefing, presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2025-2026 operating budget and proposed fiscal year 2026 through 2035, the capital improvement program. Mr. Richard Kaywood, County Administrator, welcome. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It is my privilege to share with you the proposed fiscal year 2026 operating budget as well as the 26 through 35 capital improvement program. I want to start by saying the budget that we have proposed is, of course, balanced. I'm required to give you a balanced budget, as are you required to pass one by the Commonwealth. And there's a number of different approaches that localities around the country take to what I'm doing today. So in some parts of the country, the staff will go off in a corner somewhere and come up with a budget, and then the first time you see it is the first time you've heard about it. We take a much different approach here at Roanoke County. So as you will recall, we started working with you last August on what you're seeing today. So we've had numerous work sessions with the board. I've met with you many times in a variety of different ways. And so what I'm presenting today is really the product of this collaboration that our staff has had with the board throughout that time. And I do want to make it clear that, while I certainly am actively engaged in the budget, I am not the key staff member in this effort. So we do have some of our budget team behind us here. So Steve Elliott, who's our budget director, and Ian Haw from budget manager from the finance office, led by Lori Gerhardt, our director of finance. Then, of course, Rebecca Owens, Deputy County Administrator, is very involved in the creation of the budget. And if you ask me any really hard questions, I'm going to turn around and look to them, and they will hopefully have better answers than me on some of the very technical questions you may wish to consider. And then last but not least, I always give this disclaimer, but it's particularly appropriate this year. The numbers that we're presenting today, for the most part, have been stable for about 6 weeks. So this does not represent the latest look at a snapshot of what's happening in the economy today. And one item in particular this year that does create some concern is just the effects that some of the tariffs will have at the national level on a variety of things. I would say in particular vehicles / personal property. So, we may be dealing with that later on in the process or even perhaps into the future as we see how that will manifest in our budget. But I do want to start with something I'm calling the tax relief journey, because I just recently passed my 3rd anniversary in this role and my 12th anniversary at the county. But one thing upon assuming this job that was very clear to me from the board was I had sort of 2 overarching goals. One was economic development and growth, and number 2 was to try to use that to drive down our rate of taxation. And so we started the journey of tax relief back the first time I presented the budget to you, which was the FY23 budget, where we provided about $12.2 million in tax relief that was targeted at personal property. At the time, we thought that rise in value would be temporary. That's turned out not to be the case. And so moving on into FY24, we reduced the real estate tax rate by 3 cents. We reduced the personal property tax rate by 10 cents, and we believe that to be the first ever reduction in personal property tax rates in the county's history. We reduced machinery and tools tax rate, and we also increased the threshold that a small business can pay to make it the $50 fee instead of paying a BPOL. In the last budget cycle for FY25, the fiscal year we're in now, we further reduced the real estate tax rate by 2 cents, and then in the proposed budget, we're proposing to reduce that real estate tax rate by another penny. And if you look at this through history, this graph goes back to the year 2000. It starts over on the, at least my left-hand side of the column, at $1.13. So from then to now, that tax rate has been reduced by a dime. So there was one reduction back in 01 and then in 06 and 07. But for many, many years, our tax rate was stable at $1.09. So we believe that change from $1.09 to the $1.03 today is the largest real estate reduction we've done over that shorter period of time in the county's history as well. And I showed you this slide last year. We've updated it to include the proposed reduction in the current budget. And then I came to realize as we were developing this presentation that this slide is actually wrong in a very important way. It actually understates the value of the tax reduction, because what this slide did, both this year and in the last budget presentation, was this just looked at a budget year snapshot of what the value of tax changes were. But the thing about tax rate changes is the tax rate reduction you got last year, you get again this year, right? So it's a cumulative effect. So I asked the budget staff to plot this out graphically, and what this graph shows is when you go back to 2022, before we started this rate reduction, what was our actual revenue that we took in versus what we would have gotten without tax reduction, to see that delta. And you can see in the current year that we're proposing, but for the tax relief that we did over that period of time, our projected revenues would be $286 million instead of $270. So when we update the slide and we look at the cumulative value of these tax rate reductions, they almost double from that earlier slide. So through the proposed 2026 budget, that tax relief would be $47.2 million instead of the about half that I showed you 2 slides ago. So that's important for a couple of reasons. First, what it means for us as citizens when we pay taxes, but also certainly tax rate reduction has a long-term influence over the budget. Start looking a little bit more in detail at the current year. We are projecting an additional $9.7 million in revenue. You'll see that there's about a 4.61% increase projected in real estate. I will point out that part of that number being at 4.6% is reflecting the change that we've discussed with the board previously on how we are accounting for some of the tax relief programs that affect real estate. So we're now showing that in the anticipated revenue line and not charging it off later as an expense. You will notice that we are showing some modest growth in personal property tax. We've kept that projection relatively flat the last couple of years, but we are starting to see, after we kind of had this run up during COVID that flattened out, now we're starting to see a rise again in vehicle values. And I do think, again, some of the recent things happening on the global stage will probably tend to push us in that direction of higher vehicle values, because that is putting pressure on the price of new cars. And that's also just the general shortage of vehicles that were not produced during COVID, right? Not being in the used car market today is continuing to keep those used car values high. Now, one thing I will point out that's a little bit of a concern, we are projecting lower growth in the sales tax category. And I think, again, that's kind of a national trend. I would attribute at least part of that effect to some of the items like, for example, eggs is kind of popular, but it's affecting family spending patterns. That's a little bit showing up as a reduction in sales tax. Sales tax is fairly volatile, so it's possible that could change, but right now we have a pretty conservative estimate on those revenue projections. When we look at our budget and we put it all together, this is the whole $270 million. You will see, as is always the case, our number one expenditure is on our local public schools. I will point out that this is looking at all of the revenue. As you all are well aware, we have a revenue sharing formula with our schools, but not every dollar that we have in revenue goes through that formula. So there are certain grants that we receive or certain things that we may pay out as benefits that aren't included there. So that 38% is a little lower than the 41 to 42% that we see when we do the actual detailed calculation. The second biggest destination for our local tax dollars go into public safety. In this particular cut of the graph, this includes our uniform public safety as well as our social services staff, because those two worlds are highly intertwined. On the next slide, I'm breaking out support functions a little bit just to kind of show you some of the ways that those pan out. We updated this graph a little bit this year to show you both with each category within support what percentage of support they represent, but also what percentage of the overall budget, which I think in some ways is more useful. So for example, information technology represents almost 24% of support function, but it's around 3% of the overall county budget. Non-departmental and our constitutional officers each represent a little over 2%. And then general administration, which includes offices like county administrator's office, county attorney, clerk's office, and some other functions, is about 1.68%. So very little of our cost is overhead in nature compared to the operational costs that we see across our departments. Our next slide is definitely kind of our favorite single slide of the presentation in terms of the information it conveys. So this is what we call kind of budget on a page. So this is really kind of the headlines of our entire budget proposal put together. So you'll see again that $9.7 million of new revenue and the 270 total. So of that new revenue, about $3 million of that will be going to Roanoke County Public Schools. About $3.6 million goes to public safety pay changes, and about 1.34 for general government. You'll see another significant chunk for CSA. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail later. And then one other one I'll point out that I'll also mention later is the debt funding model. So that's $530,000. Doesn't sound like a whole lot against the backdrop of a $270 million budget. However, that is an increase that we have to make each year, right? So that does continue on as we step up into the 3-school/2020 plan. The budget as proposed has a 2% cost of living increase for general county employees and a 0.75% increase in the anchor salary for our public safety grade step plans. What that means is for the earlier grade or steps, so that would be step 1 through 9, the folks that are in that would receive a 3% raise, and then the higher steps a 2% raise, which would be similar to general county employees. However, one important nuance here in this proposal is that we are projecting about a 7% increase in our cost for health insurance, or we're self-insured, but our cost for the claims related to health insurance as a county, this proposal does absorb all of those costs. So for county employees, while they receive annual raises typically, to the extent that their insurance increases take that back away from them, us absorbing that cost does make that 2% raise a little bit larger. And this is especially helpful for our lower paid employees for whom the insurance premium makes up a larger percentage of their total paycheck. We are proposing to keep our health clinic open. And we're also going to offer some additional supplemental benefits that we haven't offered before. They'll be at no cost to the county, but things county employees have asked for. And then finally, and this is a little bit unusual, but there are a number of uncertainties in the budget this year. I would like to revisit where we are with pay at the end of the calendar year when we have a better picture on revenues, with the hope that we can add to that raise that we started in July. We normally don't bifurcate the raise, but I think this year there's a lot of reasons that that's a prudent move to kind of look at this as a two-step process, just given, some uncertainty and just the overall tightness of the budget this year. I just want to emphasize again, education is the top priority of the county from a budget perspective, and we will transfer over $100 million to Roanoke County Public Schools this year in the form of direct support to their operating, school capital, and then CSA, which we share. When we look at that over time, this graph does not include capital, so look at this slightly differently. That increase has been almost $30 million since 2017. And again, this number is very rapidly closing in on $100 million a year. And then when you look at our expenditures more broadly, again, you can see public safety being featured as one of the pillars in addition to schools. Speaking to both chiefs this week, our calls for service do continue to rise across the board. And they also continue to change. So as our population ages, we certainly are seeing increased demand for fire and rescue services, particularly medical calls. But then also in the police department, and I want to mention this briefly because this has been a change over time. There used to be a little bit of a joke in the county that you weren't a real police officer until you'd worked at least one fender bender by Tanglewood Mall. But as we know, VDOT has spent a lot of money improving the traffic flow in that area. They're getting ready, actually they're in the process now of launching a large project to revamp that whole interchange. So hopefully there'll be a future where that joke would not make any sense because folks don't see fender benders in front of the mall anymore. But to some extent, some of those calls are being replaced with much more serious calls, like some citizen perhaps calling and saying, I'm concerned that there may be some drug dealing, down my street, or perhaps some act of violence or something like that. So, a very different level of police resources is needed to investigate a concern about maybe somebody selling narcotics than there is to work a fender bender in front of the mall. So our police department complement has been very stable for a long time, but I do think in the near future we're going to need to start looking at the police department and its workload and what we're asking of it. Just to kind of round this out, with our social services operation, which here is listed under health and welfare, we do run a combined operation with the city of Salem. They pay about 40% based on actual caseload. That number has been extremely stable over time. But we now have 120 children between the two of us, again, managed by Roanoke County, in foster care. That's a very high number by historical standards. And then a very large number of folks receiving either Medicaid or on SNAP. So the work of that department is formulaic in nature in terms of how many caseworkers you need per number of cases or number of folks on benefits. So that is, again, a budget pressure, even though a lot of that is covered by the state. We still have a county piece. Then just to round this out, obviously we have a robust system of parks and libraries. Then under development, while we don't have maybe announcements of quite as big for this budget presentation as we had in the past, we are definitely seeing an uptick in folks looking at new subdivisions and new developments that, we'll see them on the second floor sometimes a year or two before you see them in real life, and we'll hit on that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Just to kind of drill down on public safety, I won't go over the raises again, but this budget does include the full funding for a full year of our new fire and rescue staff at the Bonsack Station. That's just under $2 million a year, as well as some increased operating funds that are associated with the station. Another cost that we've had in fire and rescue that's new to us is the implementation of some new FDA regulations that affect us with the drugs that we use in fire and rescue. And we used to have this great system in the Roanoke Valley that was administered by our local hospitals, but sometimes at the federal level there are solutions in search of problems, and I think this was definitely an example of that. So we have had to invest quite a bit of money to set up what are essentially our own pharmacies that are in-house, both for ourselves and our volunteers, at considerable cost, so that we can now be the folks who order and manage and secure these pharmaceutical products. And that was a shared workload, again, done by our two hospitals for many, many years. I think that worked very successfully, but we had no choice but to implement this, and this is going on statewide, but it is at a cost, and at least in my opinion, of no real benefit over where we started, but these are sometimes the things we have to do. And then finally on this slide, we continue to fund the 4 part-time SROs that work for the Sheriff Department. So for the last couple of years, we have had an SRO in each and every one of our county schools. But a growing proportion of those are now uniform police officers instead of sheriff's office. That's been a good partnership, and sheriff has been very helpful through this, but very, very gradually that's becoming an increasingly a police department delivered function. Non-public safety side, not a whole lot to share here other than we're just making some increases to cover increased operating costs in the departmental budget. Certainly software costs have continued to rise, but not a lot of changes there. I do always like to talk about our headcount and positions each budget cycle. So the big bold print, we kept bumping up the font to make this real obvious. We're not proposing any new positions in this budget. And on the slide, you can see that we are definitely today primarily a public safety organization. So when I came to work here 12 years ago, there was much more balance between public safety and non-public safety staff, but in the intervening years, particularly with the growth of our fire and rescue department, we're now about 60-40 in terms of the split between public safety / social services employees and all the other folks, and you can see growth in one and very flat in the other. When we look at our 2 departments that really had the most growth, the fire department with the addition of the Bonsack Station comes up to a strength of 221 positions, and then social services is up to 136. On the current trajectory, the Department of Social Services will soon pass the police department to be our second largest department. Again, very formulaic. There are some huge differences in cost between these 2 departments because, again, we share social services with the city of Salem, so you could argue that only 60% of these are really for the county, and then those roles are heavily subsidized by the state, so there's certainly no comparison in the cost between an individual fire and rescue employee and one in social services. But I do think this just points out a change in our workload that has happened due to demand. When we look at what we would consider to be the administrative / regulatory FTEs, again, a much different curve in the last several years, very flat. So we're not even to the sort of pre-Great Recession peak, and I don't think we ever will be back to there. And then when you add it all up, we're an organization of 1,061 positions. As we mentioned in one of our earlier work sessions, we do have about 10% staff turnover a year, so we're never on any given day going to be 1,061 people, but that's how many positions are in the budget. Kind of moving ahead to some of the other changes in cost with our regional programs. So all these agencies you see listed, we have a formulaic or agreed upon basis with which we share cost. The one that I have pointed out the last couple of years where we've seen some growth is the health department. And this is the only thing I found in my career as county administrator where perhaps when we started the journey with the health department, we were actually being subsidized by our neighbors due to some very, very old formulas they were using to assess how much we paid. So while we don't want to subsidize our neighbors, we don't want to be subsidized by them, or have it to be the other way around either. So we have been increasing what we share with the health department so that we are in balance with the utilization that we have as a county. And then the detention center, that's just based on our utilization. And then Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge receives a portion of our hotel motel tax, and that is done on an actual basis. So we make an estimate, but then that is trued up every year, so they receive exactly their proportional share of our hotel motel tax. I will not go into a whole lot of detail with the CIP other than to kind of cover it at the high level. This is a bonding year for the county, so you'll see we propose to utilize $7 million in non-bond funds and $21 million in debt funds. And this is a combination of cash and other sources that we have in addition to unutilized bonding capacity that we had from our last issuance cycle. And then when you look at the overall plan, I think it's in some ways the more important numbers. It's very balanced between debt and non-debt funding sources. So it's not a debt exclusive program by any stretch of the imagination. Looking at it over the 10-year span of time, again, the lion's share of our CIP funds do go to building projects, either replacement or heavy renovations. The next large share goes to capital maintenance of those facilities, which would also include things like our Parks and Rec facilities. Computer infrastructure, software and hardware, this is a little bit deceptive. This includes a whole lot of different things. So this is the infrastructure that provides the network that we're using right now, the laptop that I'm using now, but it also includes, and one of the major projects in there is actually a replacement of our public safety radio system and handsets, which just from a historical perspective, we budget here. So it's a combination of different things that are all kind of related to that information technology and communication arena. And then in transportation, this is the money that we directly spend in our transportation program. Transportation projects are very expensive, so almost every expenditure we make is going to be supplemented by VDOT or DRPT or another agency. Then last but not least, specialty equipment. This would include things like SCBA gear, turnout gear, and things like that for fire and rescue. Then similar things for the police department. And for the 10-year period, it's $145 million. Next slide just breaks that out into one of the area charts. I won't go over that again. I do want to spend some more time with these next two slides. So in order to operate in a conservative and financially prudent manner, the board has adopted some wide-ranging financial policies. One of those are our debt policies. And so we have two debt limits that we use as a county. One is debt as a percentage of our general government expenditures, and the other is debt as a percentage of our total assessed real estate value in the county. You can see as of the end of the last fiscal year, we're well under both of those limits. When we complete the planned borrowing for this year's CIP, in addition to, and most importantly influenced by the bonding associated with the 3 schools project, you'll see that we're now much closer at least to that first limit of 10% of our general governmental expenditures. Less of an issue with the overall assessment percentage, which I think is actually a less important ratio for us anyway. This is exactly as we had planned, so this is not a surprise, but one thing I do want to point out to the board is we do not have a lot of capacity to take on additional debt that's not currently planned, right? So the planned borrowing that we have with our agreed upon borrowing with the schools is fine, but if somebody wanted to propose to build some new expensive thing and add it to it, we would run into some challenges very quickly with some of your debt limits and probably would not recommend that. There was a number of things that we shared previously with the board that we were unable to fund, so we're certainly not able to fund all the things we would like to fund. One in particular we will work on going forward is how we fund our fleet. And for us, the fleet is everything from police cars to ambulances to trash trucks and everything in between. Most of it is outside of police cars is kind of specialty vehicles. Our light fleet's actually fairly small. So that's not in there. Then there's a number of capital needs that we'll speak to a little bit more in a minute. Kind of looking out at the horizon and things that are a challenge, and I have a detailed slide to follow on CSA, but CSA is definitely one of the fastest growing parts of our budget. We're working carefully with the schools to try to see if we can't reduce that rate of growth. Continuing to pay our folks. I hear very regularly from the board about how pleased you all are with our employees. I think we have some excellent staff at Roanoke County, but to attract and retain people that are very effective, we have to pay them appropriately. We'll always make the argument, though, and I've argued this throughout my career, that I would much rather have one employee that we pay correctly, that is eager and very skilled, than two employees that are less so, right? So one A student to me is worth two C students every day of the week. So one of the things that allows us to look at a lot of strategic things going forward is having very good people, because all things being equal, you can operate with less of them at lower cost. Because if nothing else, with a very high-performing employee, I'm only paying benefits and other things once. One other thing that we do each budget cycle that does take a significant portion of all the money available is we do have a number of funds that have balance requirements that you all set that we have to satisfy each budget cycle. I bolded again the additional $530,000 for the Scree Schools project and the move to the 2020 debt model. This does represent about half a cent's value if you think of it in terms of real estate taxes. And so we need to make this up every cycle in growth, which is the way we've been covering that. But it is a significant financial commitment that we will handle each budget cycle, because while, you know, $530,000 is not a lot of money in and of itself, as you incrementally grow that, it does become rather large. Operating costs, I want to particularly touch on vehicles. One phenomenon that's going on in the world of vehicles, I love vehicles, is that as old models of vehicles are being cycled out, their replacement is all of a sudden dramatically more expensive. So I'll pick on, well, I won't mention a particular manufacturer, but a pickup truck that our budget manager happens to own. If you look at the 2025 version of that vehicle, I think it was replaced as a 2024 model. But if you look at the model changeover, the price for his truck went up by like $10,000 or $12,000 for the same thing, right? So the truck changed, but the price point changed a whole lot more. And that's affecting us as consumers, but also since we do operate a large fleet, we're seeing that. Vehicle parts, body work has been another area that's really increased a lot in cost. So all the things that go with vehicles, the rate of inflation has been significantly faster than general inflation, so that's an area that we're going to have to keep working on. Then again, software as a service. You all have seen this graph before in work session, but I want to point out again the growth of CSA cost. So CSA costs have doubled in 5 years. This is an unsustainable curve long term. So again, we are actively engaged with Roanoke County Public Schools to try to find other ways to manage this. This is also a statewide issue affecting localities around the Commonwealth. But by your fund balance policy, we should have a positive $1.8 million in the CSA fund. Instead, as of today, we have a negative $3.5 million. Which puts us about $5.3 million in the hole. I want to stress to everybody in the room or who may be watching, this is not a financial crisis for the county, because we have many funds, and all the other funds have nice positive balances, so we're not in the red by any stretch of the imagination as a county. However, this is a real deficit in this fund that we're going to have to work to make up. So you'll see some money in the proposed budget to start chipping away at this negative 3.5. But what I really want to highlight is the rate of growth of CSA. This went from being, you know, when I first came to work here, this was a very, very small part of our budget because I came back in 2013. It's now grown to be a very significant part of our budget. So this is something, again, a challenge that I think will have both local solutions and approaches as well as those at the Commonwealth level. Another long-term challenge that we face as a county is the age of our facilities and actually the number of buildings we have. So we have lots of different types of buildings, but even some of the newer ones are starting to get older. So I was a county resident, actually have been for quite some time when Green Ridge opened, but that was over 15 years ago now. So that building is not new anymore, and it's going to require some maintenance of some expensive systems. And then we have our oldest building, the Brambleton Center, that was brand new back in the heart of the roaring 20s. So I don't think we celebrated its centennial, but we could have. So it is over 100 now. So it's very old. And then due to our rapid growth that really, I think, accelerated from the 60s through the 80s, we have a lot of buildings that are kind of late 70s, early 80s around, including the one that we're in today. And when you look at this across the system, I won't go through this in detail except for the summary. And I will say there is some subjectivity to what you call a building, right? Because we have more than 42 structures, but of buildings that we identified. The average age is 42. And the average year built was 1983, which was the year I started high school. So just as I am not a spring chicken, our buildings are not either. So there's a lot of long-term challenge in having your square footage be of that vintage. So I've talked about a lot of challenges, but I want to talk about next the way that we have gone about trying to strategically make a lot of these problems a lot easier to manage, and that is through aggressive economic development. We've had a number of really solid announcements this year, and the funny theme of what I'll walk through here is 40,000, because you'll see a theme with square footage here. We just want to hit a few of the highlights. The new Hyundai dealership, the Southern Team operation is very large. It's one of the largest car dealers in the state, and this was their 10th expansion in their history in the county. But that was a $10 million investment, right? And 45 folks come to work there every day. And while we might not think of this as economic development in the same way we would think of as a manufacturing use, if you look at the collective investment and employment just in Southern Team Auto out on Peters Creek, it is a very large investment with very high employment, and quite a few of those folks make a very good living working on very complicated vehicles. And they're also definitely one of our larger taxpayers with the sale of those vehicles. So that was a really nice thing to see in the county, because one of the goals I've always had is try to retain some of our significant businesses in the county, because these things can and do pick up and move from time to time. And so just to keep the new Hyundai dealership being a county dealership was very important for us. At 47,000 feet, we have the new YMCA over at Tanglewood, a much smaller dollar investment. But we've had so much focus on the exterior of the mall. Just having an investment like this that generates some employment and traffic to the interior is certainly a good thing for the future of sort of the greater Tanglewood complex. Vinton is getting a new hotel that should be under construction this construction season. This has been a long time coming for the town, and we have invested as a county a lot of money in the town in the immediate vicinity of this project, with a new library and some other partnership projects we've done with the town of Vinton. So this getting off the ground is another really nice investment in the Vinton part of the county. And then out in the Bonsack area, the 540 social project, again, 40,800 square feet. But again, another very significant investment. $20 million is a lot of money to build, a nice entertainment complex. We hear from folks out in that area, they'd like different things to do, different places to eat, and this certainly will offer that. And again, we expect that to get under construction sometime during the current construction season. And then I won't go through these one by one, but we've had a lot of other activity going on. We have 2 active sheets projects in the county right now. Publix, we understand, will be starting soon on their Cave Spring location. Have a Starbucks under construction now, which is, I guess, where the old Burger King used to be at Cave Spring Corner. And then a number of other businesses of various sizes around the county. Now, we have highlighted Wells Fargo and Mack Truck a lot over the last year and a half or so. And announcements are fun. We all like to announce economic development investments, but announcements are just that. They're announcements. What's really important is that these projects come to fruition. So I'm very happy to update the board that both the Wells Fargo project and the Mack Truck project are both actively under construction today. It's my understanding the Wells project is somewhere around halfway complete. Mack Truck, I'm not exactly sure how far along they are, but I bring these up specifically because while Wells Fargo, the complex is very visible from Plantation Road, the work is happening inside the building. So I've had any number of people ask me when it's going to start. I'm like, well, it started like a year ago. It's actively being worked on. And then Mack Truck is not visible really from any main roads. And even when you get up there, the work is to the rear of the building. So again, that's underway as we speak. Then another major economic development project, in my opinion, is the new CTE school, which is under construction now. And we partner a lot with Roanoke County Public Schools with our businesses. And CTE is really designed to create the workforce that the businesses we're trying to attract need. So our economic development staff spends a lot of time out at our businesses with teachers, administrators from the schools, oftentimes students, because we want to get folks interested in good careers that already exist in the Valley. And while I think everybody that lives in the greater Roanoke Valley understands healthcare to be a very important business sector, what most folks would get wrong is the fact that manufacturing is actually a bigger contributor to our local GDP than is healthcare. And we are a major manufacturing region. And I think folks think that's something we used to be, but it's something we actually are today. And over the last 4 years, over half of the manufacturing growth in the Commonwealth took place in the Roanoke Valley, and that represented over 1% of the national growth in manufacturing employment was right here. So we have a vibrant manufacturing presence in the county. And I think one thing good about it that maybe makes it less visible is if we had like a Toyota plant in the county, everybody would work there and they would all know, hey, we manufacture and we make Toyotas, which would be great. But in some sense, what we have is almost better because it's so diversified. So you can just see on this picture, we have Mack Truck and Double Envelope. So Double Envelope makes everything under the sun that's paper and printed. Mack Truck makes medium-duty trucks. So it's very unlikely that some of the cyclical downturns that those two industries would have would exactly overlap each other, so that manufacturing base being very diversified is very good for us. And many of these businesses have been around for a very long time. So Double Envelope has a very long history in the county. Manufacturers like Medico that have deep roots in the county. So we're very blessed to have a very rich and vibrant manufacturing sector. Another one that always is worth mentioning is Elbit, making night vision for our military right here in the county. And I think, one of our goals is really to raise awareness of those employment opportunities that exist right here. We also focus on our small businesses, and I did not build this slide, so but I will tell a funny story with it. So this is a small grant program called BEEP that we administer through the EDA, but I am the stepson of a solo practice small-town dentist, so you can see one of the awards went to a local dentist to implement some new technology. And most dental practices aren't that big, so they're fairly small employers, but important ones. And then Fleet Feet, which sells the running shoes that I wear, also got another little grant for some technology. Again, a smallish business, but collectively, many of our county residents work at things like dentist offices and Fleet Feet and other small businesses. So again, very diverse range of employment and economic activity in the county. And this is the last real content slide that I have for you today, but this is kind of the vision looking forward. So I'll kind of close as I started. So again, I got 2 marching orders when I came to the county, which is really aggressively work on economic development and trying to reduce our rate of taxation. So we are continuing on that path, while trying to maintain excellent county services. But to keep on the pacing we're on, there's a couple of other things we're really going to have to start to look at as a county. One is our footprint. As you saw earlier, we have 42 buildings and they're mostly old. Most local governments of our size are much more consolidated in terms of their footprint. They don't have 42 buildings scattered all over the place. And we'll always have some that need to be scattered. For example, fire and rescue stations are, by definition, out in the community, geographically distributed. Libraries are going to be geographically distributed. But we have some money in the CIP to do an intentional study to look at how can we consolidate some of our other footprint, because every building that we can reduce by consolidating with another building is a lot of expense that we can offload. And then in many cases, we can take the property and put it back on the tax rolls. So we want to really pursue that going forward. And at your last meeting, we talked about the use of additional technology such as AI to help us get our work done. In the short run, that'll make us more efficient. But I think longer term, it will enable us to operate with a smaller complement of staff over time. And you can see we've already done that when you saw, we have to look back to 2009 to see our peak employment in some of these regulatory functions. Well, we still do all the same things we did back then. We just do it with fewer people. And we need to continue on that path. And then the final thought in this arena, and again, I get asked this question from time to time, and I'll share the answer that I always give, is, I'll have a friend that may live in one of our neighboring counties that has a lower tax rate, and they'll say, well, how come your tax rate is more? What's the difference? And I said, well, the biggest difference is what happens when you call 911. I can guarantee you anywhere in the county, you're going to have a robust response. It's going to get there quickly with folks that are well-trained with the equipment that they need, whether that's the police department or fire and rescue. And depending on where you are around us, that's going to vary, right? And if your house is on fire, if you're having a heart attack, getting there from our new Bonsack station in 2 or 3 minutes versus somebody showing up 15, 20, 30 minutes later makes a big difference to you, but that comes at a cost, right? There's a cost associated with that. And then there's other things that we do that certain localities don't do. For example, we pick up your trash. We don't charge you a fee for that. Those are all decisions that the board gets to make through time. In other words, what is the scope of our operation? And we can always revisit that. But we do deliver, at least today, a very large scope of operations, and our goal is to deliver that scope as efficiently as we can. But we can always look to see, do we want to change part of that scope? And then maybe more importantly with that scope too, we want to be very careful about adding things to that scope, right? Because it's always easy to think about something that we don't do today that we would like to do. But again, those things all have long-term costs. So I think for me, looking forward to the next couple of years, I'm going to have a lot of focus on space and how it's allocated, how it's utilized. Sometimes it does take a capital project to consolidate and be more efficient, but we do have quite a few county facilities that are located on very attractive pieces of property. So I think that if we can combine up some real estate over a period of time, it would be very beneficial for both the efficiency of our operations and also what we're able to give back to our citizens in tax relief. Then the last slide in the deck is always the same, which is the calendar. So our treasurer is anxiously awaiting your next meeting where you'll adopt tax rates, because he's always running up against his deadline to print his bills. So he hits the send button right after you all vote. So we push that out as late as we can to give you as much flexibility as possible. Then there'll be opportunities for the public to speak to you both on April 22nd and May 13th. And then we plan to have the budget adopted, or recommend you do that, on May 27th. We'll give you the advice that I always give you, which is I have given up on the Commonwealth schedule for adopting its budget. I recommend that you proceed forward with your calendar, and should we need to adjust something based on something the Commonwealth does, we can always come back and make those adjustments. But the work in Richmond never seems to end, and I see nothing that tells me that that process is going to get any smoother anytime soon. So we kind of have somewhat detached what we do from them. I recognize that does have more effect on our schools than really it does on us directly. So, but again, I think our best strategy is to go ahead and, irrespective of what happens in Richmond, to go ahead and adopt your budget on May 22nd. So with that, I would be happy, both I and our team, to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. K. Wood. I'll start with the board members who would wish to comment. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am without speech. I am speechless. You have checked every box on here that I had to comment on, including the rationalization of the infrastructure, which is the buildings. So I won't dwell on that because you and I have talked about that. I will say this, though. Our senior citizens are really challenged, and they visit this building every day for the last 3 months. And the Commissioner of Revenue will tell you there are folks out there making $18,000 a year that didn't even know they could sign up for the senior program. We need to continue getting that message out, and I think our Commissioner and I have chatted briefly about that. And this year it was raised to $60,000. Those folks have been the stalwarts of this community for many years, and they've paid their taxes, and they're the ones that need some tax relief going forward. I will tell you this, though, we have many services that many cities would love to have. We could reduce our tax rate 5 cents, just like that, if we didn't have waste pickup. Now, I'm not saying we should discontinue our waste services. And Ashley's looking at me back there, and she knows I mean that. But what I'm telling you is, if we didn't have that, and we saved 5 cents, everyone would be happy, because their real estate tax rate would drop, and they'd have lower liability. But guess what? every single day of the week, not one day a week when they come to pick your trash up, but every single day, there would be multiple vendors in your neighborhood with more trucks running around, and then we'd be faced with safety issues because there'd be multiple vendors that would be sending you a bill that's probably as much more than you might imagine. Instead of 25, it might be $40 or $50 a month, and then they'd go up every year. So thank goodness we're one of the few counties in the Commonwealth to still have that service. So I'm glad we keep that going. But I do think this was a challenging year for the budget, and I personally want to thank staff because I've been through budgeting before, and it's not an easy task. And as soon as you finish today, tomorrow something may change that just upsets all the numbers. But I will tell you this right now. It was a balanced budget with many things, and you've touched on most all of them, including the real estate relief, the salaries for the employees, and hopes to make that up later on this year. And I would tell you this was a great presentation in a very challenging economy that we don't know what could happen that could upset all of this. And I'm talking about the big R recession. And we just hope we don't have to deal with that because then everything we just presented today will go back to the drawing board. So good job, Richard, and good job, staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. North. Yes, Ms. Hooker.
Just a real quick comment, because everything that Phil said was spot on, and we do try to give back to our citizens in any way that we can. I think that's really been a priority for this board for several years, and I think the proof is in the work here. And we appreciate your presentation, Richard. It was excellent. I'm very proud of Roanoke County and what we can accomplish on the tax rate that we incur or give out. And things like the trash, and we don't charge an extra fee for that. Many localities have excellent trash service, but I believe they most all charge an additional fee. And I've also learned over the years, we're talking a lot about trash tonight, Ashley, that, I don't believe there's another county in the state of Virginia that collects trash like we do on a weekly basis with a bi-weekly opportunity for bulk pickup with no additional charge. So just kudos to Roanoke County staff in making this all work and do it in an efficient way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hooker. Any?
Sure.
All right.
I look forward to some light reading over the next week. Mr. Cawood, staff, thank you. 3 comments. Right off the top of my head, I see we're looking at a 2% cost of living salary increase for county employees, but yet when I saw the proposed school board budget, they're looking at 3.1% for their people. That's not fair. That's not equity, and that bothers me. And we're going to have to address that. A second comment, I think a lot of people look at Roanoke County as a very wealthy county, and we are well off in many respects. But I think the data you showed us, Mr. Cawood, with respect to social services growth, if we have 22,000 people on Medicaid, Medicaid is a signal for poverty. That's almost, what, 20-some percent, 22% of the county population? County population is what,
you have to think that does
98,000?
include Salem too, right?
I understand that.
So
we'll add something there, but 22,000 people on Medicaid, I think that's something we have to pay attention to. And I think we have a significant number of folks in our community, as Mr. North indicated, and as many of us have heard from our citizens with respect to increase in assessments, and we see the increase in tax relief for the elderly and handicapped. I think that's something we have to pay attention to. And I think while we may agree or disagree with respect to tax rates, that is something that directly affects our citizens. My third concern is some of our unfunded capital issues. And the one part I look at is our heavy equipment. When a fire engine costs $750,000, I think I'm close, Chief. It's about $800, all right. Ashley, garbage trucks are $400,000. And we're not able we're not able to fund those in our capital program. And I know people have laughed at me in the past, but I think picking up garbage is public safety. And if you don't believe that, let's not pick up garbage for 2 months in July and August and see what happens.
Just delay it 2 hours and listen to the phone.
Ashley gets those. So I thank staff for what you've given us. There's a lot of meat in here that we're going to have to digest. But those are the three issues that sort of popped out based on your presentation, Mr. Cawood. Thank you.
Thank you.
The biggest thing that I would like to comment on, first of all, is to staff for putting all of this together and all the hours that you've put in, basically just getting it done. I know that a lot of people have commented to me on the tax rate, which makes it very difficult for you all, even trying to decrease it for the citizens, which we love to do. But sometimes, more importantly, I would much rather maybe, how do I want to say this, keep that extra penny and have the extra EMT, fire workers, and police, because when we need them, if they're not there, and one of us has had that massive heart attack and we're 6 feet under, that tax rate no longer matters at all. So I know that a lot of people are very concerned about that, but first and foremost, those are very important to me. Our workers are very important to me. I do want to see, get tax rates cut as much as we can, but I also want to keep the good employees that we have, because just being honest with you, after being here for only a year, we've got a great group. Every single one of them. Has not been anybody that I have seen that doesn't jump to get things done. So thank you all for that, and thank you for the hard work on the budget. And Richard, thank you too for getting all this together.
Thank you, Tammy. A couple of questions here, Richard. Okay, so I'm just going through some numbers here. Proposed budget is $270 million. Check?
That's correct.
You showed a slide, 4 or 5 slides in. You showed where we had avoided over a 5 or 6 year period of $47.2 million in taxes, correct?
Yes.
You don't have to pull it up.
Oh, yeah, that was just going to help me answer your question, too.
You can't see what you can.
Okay. I'm actually not looking. I just made notes there. Anyway, it was a very interesting slide that you put together, or the staff. But so that really goes with the goals of what we've been trying to achieve with tax rate reduction over a long period. And we've gone through a recession where real estate values were way down, and then they finally recovered back. They started recovering in 2017, and so we've seen a recovery. Then we had a bump with COVID in 2020, a slight, nothing really happened. But I think it's significant. I appreciate you putting that slide in there, because, I really never knew the amount that we had avoided over that 5 years. So I think that's a significant number for our citizens to hear, and that's why they put us in office, is to try to manage that so it's not a burden on the citizens in Roanoke County. One other item. Okay, so to the schools, it looks like you gave me a combined number that we were transferring to the schools, $103.81 million. Is that that's the combination of the three?
Yes.
Right. So last year, we gave them how much?
I could get an exact number, because I don't know if I have the math handy with the capital and not capital. I've got the graph, which doesn't have the capital, so I'll look to the staff. It was like 94, almost 95 million without capital. So, we would be several $1 million less than the today amount. So you'd be, say 90, 99 somewhere. We can get you an exact number.
Okay. Okay, so I was right around 97 million. So that's a $6.8 million increase from last year to this year, correct? That's a 7% increase in revenues.
Does that include the debt service?
Yes, that includes the debt service. Yep, the 97, 98, yeah. So we're comparing apples to apples. So that's a 7% increase to our school system. I want the public to know that, we're giving those funds to the school system for their debt service, and they have facilities just like we do. They have 27 facilities compared to our 42. So I just wanted to make that observation. And at this point, that's really all I have. Again, I thank the staff, and Richard, we've been working on this for quite a while.
And I do want to make one just quick closing comment, and I will freely confess that I forgot to do this in the beginning, but it probably worked out for the best. So I mentioned Ian earlier, but today is Ian's birthday. But the even more fun fact about Ian is that a year ago today, we made her job offer to come to work here. So it's the anniversary of her, at least, offer of employment, and her birthday today at the budget presentation. So I thought that was a fun note to end. And again, staff and I are happy, to have a chance to digest this, to answer any more questions that you may have or put together anything that you need. Thank you.
Where's the cake?
That's later. Okay, now we move to item D under new business. First item is resolution of the Board of Supervisors, County of Roanoke, authorizing the execution of certain documents in connection with certain general obligation school bonds previously purchased by the Virginia Public School Authority. Laurie Gearhart, Director of Finance and Management Services. Welcome, Laurie Gearhart.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. At the end of last week, we received an email from the Virginia Public School Authority, who is the avenue that we do our bonds to fund our school systems, and they are doing an issuance. And actually, the next item is the second public hearing and second reading for us to issue additional bonds through them. However, part of their spring issuance that they plan to do, they are refinancing. In the government world, we call that refunding, but out in the corporate world, that's kind of what refinancing, taking the opportunity with some of the interest rates, because of the way the interest rates work. At the moment, the bond rates are actually pretty good, so they want to take advantage of that, and so they are reissuing some old bonds that were used, that we participated in their issuances, and we will get revenue back. It's a little interesting how they work it. It'll come in over several years. We don't get one big fat check. I wish we did, but we don't. Again, and it comes in once a year, August 1st. And they're like clockwork, comes right in. And we put that into our debt fund because, again, this is money that we had originally thought that we would use to pay principal and interest because, the schools in the county have that joint model that we use. And so then in turn, when that money comes in each year, I include it when we're doing the budget, and so when the debt budget is appropriated each year, it's a part of that because I know in advance, when that's coming in. And then the schools in the county share that, and then we use that for additional funding to do capital projects, because that was originally what that money was supposed to be for, to pay for debt that was for capital projects. So both in the county and in the schools' capital improvement programs, there's a line when you're looking at the funding sources, and it'll say, and we might call it different things, but basically I think it's debt refunding or something along that line. There's like a little small source of revenue over the 10 years, and that's what that represents, what those monies are coming in. So We technically do not have to have approval, but it has just been county history to bring forth a resolution. The only thing that we really have to do is the county administrator and the superintendent have to sign some forms saying, yes, we want to participate, and then the VPSA handles everything. So before you today is that resolution to allow the county administrator and also Ken Nicely to sign the forms and submit that, because the deadline is April 3rd. Another reason why we had to walk it on, because our next meeting isn't until April 8th, and we didn't get it in time to meet the original deadline of this board meeting. So,
Okay.
have any additional questions?
Yeah, so at this point, I'll ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, great. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Good news.
Yes, it is.
Good news.
It is. Hearing none on the discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes. Thank you. Move to item E, public hearing, second reading of ordinance. Item 1, ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $46,570,000 general obligation school bonds of the County of Roanoke, Virginia, to be sold through the Virginia Public School Authority. Lori Gearhart, Director of Finance and Management Services, welcome again.
Yes, thank you again. So this is the public hearing and the second reading for approval of the ordinance to be able to administer and participate in the spring issuance of the Virginia Public School Authority. We are using these funds to pay for the Roanoke County Career and Technical Center that's being built. It is part of the MOU that was approved by both the county and the school boards. So we've been knowing that this is something that we've been needing to do. And as you go out on Peters Creek, you see that progress is being made, and they're coming right along with that. So we are ready to issue those bonds so we can have the money to complete that project.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Gearhart before I open the public hearing?
Just one.
Yeah.
Ms. Gearhart, and it was based on what we just walked on, that is the refinancing or refunding of the 2007. As I read the ordinance, I guess VPSA would not be able to refinance this bond until 2035, something like that. So it's about a 10-year.
Yes, usually.
You're stuck with whatever the interest rate is now for 10 years.
Yeah.
But so if interest rates go down 2 years from now, we can't, the VPSA would not be able to refinance. You'd have to wait a decade.
Yes.
I was afraid of
Knock
that.
on wood, right now, again, because of the way that the interest rates work, the actual bond rates are actually pretty good. Now, we won't know exactly what the rate will be until it is, officially priced out, but currently, the preliminary numbers are using about a 3.8%
That's great.
interest rate. So that is pretty good. Another reason why they want to do
Do it now.
the reissuance of the previous bond. So we'll just hope that that continues on until the final pricing is done.
All right. Any other?
Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing in regards to this bond. Do we have anybody lined up to speak? Okay. In hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance?
Motion to approve the ordinance borrowing $46,660,000 through the Virginia Public School Authority.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, and hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes, we're up to 270 million, folks.
I know.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes. Thank you. We move to item F, appointments. Do any board members have an appointment that has not been given to the clerk and included in the board of reports for agenda item F? If there's a motion to approve the list, appointments set forth in the board report.
I move item F1.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? In hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes. We move to item G, consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by one resolution in the form of forms listed below. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Does any board member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, if hearing none, is there a motion to adopt all the matters on the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? In hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes, thank you. We move to item H.
We'll take a break. Let's be here 30 more minutes.
Now. We'll take a break now.
5-minute break.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we will return. We're going to resume to item H, citizen comments and communications. This time has been set aside for Roanoke County citizens, county property owners, county business owners to address the board on matters of interest or concern. Each speaker shall be afforded 3 minutes to speak. I do have a request here to speak. So we appreciate you coming to the board today. When your name is called, please come forward, state your name, your address, prior to sharing your comments. Each person is permitted to speak up to 3 minutes. At the front of the podium is a light system. It tells you how much time you have remaining. When the light changes from green to yellow, please share any concluding marks. When the light changes from yellow to red, it means the 3 minutes is up and your time is ended. While the board desires to hear from all of you to speak, we ask that speakers try not to repeat the same comments that's already been made. And I will start with the list that I have. The first speaker I have is a Leslie Lippard.
Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Lippard, and I am a Richfield living resident. I live at 3730 Knoll Ridge Road in Roanoke County. And before I start, I want to introduce, we have a contingency of folks that came. Some will speak, and some are supporters.
Very good. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors. The Facility Condition Assessment and Master Planning Services Report for Roanoke County, released in August of 2024, identified critical demographics concerning Roanoke County's population of 98,507. The assessment determined that the resident risk was high. 37.2 of county residents, or 34,817 citizens, were 55 and older. The Master Planning Services Executive Summary emphasized supporting an aging population by promoting the development of Roanoke County as an older-friendly community. Critical outcomes for serving the public welfare of older citizens include guaranteeing quality, comprehensive, and accessible health care for seniors, ensuring upgraded transit services for the elderly, and an increased housing appropriation to sustain affordable lodging for the aging population. Roanoke County has 23 continuing care retirement facilities to accommodate its demographic age bracket of citizens 55 and older. Of those, only 2, both owned by Friendship Retirement Community, have a classification status as a tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit, Friendship Health and Friendship South, and Friendship North. Salem Terrace in Salem, Virginia, is a third tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit friendship facility. In rescinding of the property tax-exempt status of Friendship's retirement community at Ridgefield Living by the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors and Commissioner of the Revenue, we feel you essentially prioritized its local government tax source above policy compliance for its aging population. I would urge the Roanoke County Board of Supervisors and Commissioner of the Revenue to enforce regulatory measures ensuring the public welfare of its retirement risk population and find alternative means of, do I stop?
Go ahead.
Or may I finish my sentence?
Finish up. Go ahead.
Okay. And find alternative means of generating revenue which do not impact Friendship's retirement community at Friendship Living, serving 525 county residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lippard. Next speaker is Robert Harinko.
My name is Robert Harinko. I live at 3730 Richfield Lane in Salem, Roanoke County.
If you could pull the mics up just a bit, there you go. Thank you very much.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. Do I need to repeat? Am I okay?
That's right.
Okay. Good afternoon. My concern is why Richfield Living is a special place to live. Rising costs are affecting everything we're doing, and I'm sure it includes the municipal governments. Roanoke County is experiencing a lot of changes in their budget, as we've seen right here, and I find it hard to understand why changing an exemption for nonprofits on senior living will have much of an effect on the county. Richfield Living and Friendship Richfield Living has been utilizing the exemption since 1987 and has provided an affordable communal housing option for county seniors. Richfield is a vibrant community. There's an organized effort to meet the needs of over 500 residents and maintain a high quality of life. Friendship is bases their quality of life on 7 elements. Physical wellness. Physical wellness is essential, maintaining health through physical activity, healthy diet, good sleep habits, and medical advice. Financial wellness. Managing resources and promoting awareness contributes to sound decision-making when planning for retirement and continuum care. Social wellness. Maintaining relationships as well as fostering new ones provides fullness of life and contributes to the community. Intellectual wellness, engaging in intellectual stimulating activity is a proven approach to keeping minds alert and promote interest in the world in which we live. Emotional wellness, feelings are the lens through which the world is viewed. Spiritual wellness provides a personal guide for values and traditions. My wife Linda and I chose to live at Richfield because of the availability of these elements, since we do not have the physical wherewithal to maintain a household and maintain a healthy living style alone. Friendship meets and exceeds the satisfaction of these needs. All these elements require staffing, infrastructure, planning, and budgeting. We are concerned that any increase in cost to Friendship will result in a reduction or elimination of the elements that we're so proud of and help us to maintain a quality of life. We're asking the board and the Commissioner of Revenue to reconsider the change in the tax structure for Friendship to prevent an increase in rent or a reduction in services being offered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Next speaker is Lisa Chrisman.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Crispin. I live at 3720 Knoll Ridge Road in Salem, Virginia. I live in the independent living facility. And the words independent living do mean, yes, I can live on my own. However, I am disabled, an older adult, and low income. These disadvantages make it very hard to live, and it's discouraging. The amenities Friendship provides allow me to live comfortable, safe, and happy. Taking away the tax-exempt status would mean cuts in budgets, which can reflect changes in amenities offered to myself and others like me. I depend on such things such as transportation, a well-maintained apartment, security, and well-maintained grounds, along with community events that the services provide. They will help me feel comfortable and cared for. Community events help me to have fellowship with other residents, and it's pulling me out of the shell that I've created around myself as being a domestic abuse survivor. Keeping my apartment well-maintained gives me a peace of mind that I don't have to worry about repairs. The security services provide comfort to me to know that I am going to be able to live without fear of a crime. I hope you will reconsider your stance on revoking our tax exempt status so I may continue to be able to live a happy, well cared for, and affordable life that I have now. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Next speaker is Joretta Lawrence.
I'm a little short.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joretta Lawrence, and I'm 92 years old. Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
I have lived at Knollwood Apartments, which is an independent living of the Friendship Richfield community, and I've lived there now for 9 years. I've learned of this community from some of my family members living there before me. My mother lived to be 99 years old. In the last few years, she was well taken care of in the nursing home there. My sister lived in Knollwood Apartments, which is an independent living where I live now. She lived there until she had a stroke, and I transferred her down to an assisted living unit, J.C. Thomas, where she was well taken care of until she passed away at the age of 96. My husband, of 56 years, he fell and broke his hip, and he was taken from the hospital after surgery to the nursing home there where he was taken care of and passed away there. So after retiring from Roanoke County General District Court as a deputy clerk, I decided that was the place for me to live. So I paid rent, of course. I live in the Knollwood Apartments, independent living. But I'll tell you, my rent comes right back to me like a circle. I don't have time to name all these services we have, but a few of the examples that I've experienced myself, I had my shoulders replaced. After recovery from surgery in Lewis Gale Hospital, our transportation came, picked me up to hospital, took me to rehab on campus where I was taken care of till I was able to live and take care of myself again by myself at Knollwood Apartments. And one day I fell in my bathroom. After that, I added this little token to my rent. I do pay rent, but it comes, like I say, it all comes right back to me. And I was in the kitchen one day, fixing a sandwich. This thing went off. I leaned against the counter. Before I could get it turned off and to get to my telephone to call somebody, here was 2 staff members come through my door in my apartment. My sparkler alarm went off after the hours one night, and I thought, I'm going to have to listen to this beep all night. But I called the security number. Within 15 minutes, there was a man there with new batteries and fixed that. We are living in a safe place, and I hope and pray that Roanoke County can fix their budget and not have to levy a tax on us, which will raise our rent and take away some of the services we have. So I thank you all very much. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Gretchen Johnson.
Gretchen Johnson, 3730 Knoll Ridge Road, Apartment 407, Salem, Virginia, 24153. Thank you for allowing me to take up 3 minutes of your time today. My name is Gretchen Johnson. I am 82 years old. I moved here from South Dakota. I've lived in Knollwood on the Friendship Richfield campus for 9 years, and I'm going to talk about transportation. First, I ask you to picture the residents at Richfield. The average age of residents living at Richfield is 83.13. We're going to use 83 for the next 3 minutes. 83-year-olds are not just senior citizens, we are considered elderly. 1 in 3 residents living at Richfield have rollators or walkers. 40% of our independent living residents do not have cars. Now I ask you to picture our campus. Our campus consists of 52 acres. 52 acres is approximately 10 football fields. And here's our campus, and our independent living is Knollwood, where I live, and Ridgecrest, the cottages, Lake Retreats, and the villas. And independent living spends most of our time right over here in the town center because the Answer Cafe is there, all of our meetings and activities are there. We have assisted living, the Oaks and JCT. JCT also has a memory unit. Over here is the nursing home, rehab, and the wellness center. The bus takes us all of those places. Down here's the doctor's office and the dialysis center. The bus goes there. And down here, the Glenvar Library, and the bus takes us there. And there's no charge for any of this transportation on our 10 football fields. We also have off-campus transportation, a free grocery bus every Wednesday to Food Lion, Kroger, or Walmart. Medical transportation for both Salem and Roanoke is available all weekdays, and Richfield Rides operates Monday and Friday and works like a taxi service. We can call for a ride anywhere in Salem. There is a charge for those two services. I am one of the 40% who doesn't have a car, and I rely on our off-campus transportation. I am aware transportation is a very large expenditure for Friendship and is being looked at for ways to cut costs. But please, think back again to the picture I painted of our elderly 83-year-old Richfield residents and our 52-acre campus, and you realize any additional charges, changes, or cutbacks Friendship might have to make would be devastating for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have last speaker, and after that last speaker, I am going to give some comments. Last speaker will be William Palmer.
Good afternoon. My name is William Palmer. I live at 3730 Richfield Lane. I thank you very much for this opportunity to speak regarding a subject that could change my life considerably. First, a little of my personal background. I've been a resident at Richfield for 5 years. I'm a native Vermonter, and my wife, Mary, who I lost a few years ago, came from Pennsylvania. My lifetime of work prior to retirement was in the insurance industry, and this required numerous moves, all of which were in the northeastern part of the country. When the time approached closer to retirement 30 years ago, we decided to search what we envisioned could be the perfect place to call home. We found it here in Southwest Virginia, and I can say the search certainly paid off. We have come to love Southwest Virginia and all it offers, and certainly and foremost, the people who also call this place home. The one complaint I have is that the time passed way too quickly. Of course, that led us to the time in our lives when we had to look to a community serving senior needs. Obviously, monetary considerations, both for now and into the future, were an important part of the planning process. We returned to Vermont and Pennsylvania in our search, and while we found places that were less expensive, we decided Richfield Living here in Salem met our expectations at all levels. After Mary passed, I decided to keep that plan in place. It certainly proved to be the perfect move. Living here gave me the opportunity to meet and bond with many residents and staff. And I'll tell you, a lot of those folks to this day feel that they are kin. And I say almost kin because they're not blood relatives. Knowing this, I hope you can understand why I never want to leave Richfield. It said, home is where the heart is, and this is home. Consider, if you will, what I and 500 plus other residents contribute to the local community. As seniors, we don't have any children who burden the local school district. Our folks today would have appreciated that. Almost all of our outside expenditures, such as medical, dental, pharmacy, pet expenses, including local vet services, retail, groceries, vehicle purchase and upkeep, and of course our local churches. The dollars generated help to keep these business and service providers viable. Some of the taxes collected here find their way back to Roanoke County. Should I and others be forced to move, all of this would move with us. And finally, y'all, please don't send me back to Vermont, because after 30 years, I'm finally learning to speak Southern. And they'll never believe that I was born in Montpelier, Vermont. Thanks again for hearing my story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, you all are near and dear to our heart because some of us up here have elderly parents that are still living. So I've been free to speak about this with our counselor's permission and with some points that I'll stay close and narrow between the lines because we are in litigation. But I want to thank everybody that came to address the board today. We understand that certain residents of Friendship RL find themselves in challenging circumstances. As you're aware, this matter has been presented to the Roanoke County Circuit Court for review. While the county is unable to comment on pending litigation, we want you to know that we heard you today and we thank you for coming out here. We respectfully disagree with some of the factual and legal representations that were made. Invite anyone who's interested in understanding the county's position to review the legal document, it's called a demurrer, that the county has submitted to the court. We have several printed copies of that placed on the front desk in the hallway. And if additional copies are desired, you can obtain a copy by contacting Amy Whitaker, our public information officer, or Rhonda Perdue, our deputy clerk. Again, we thank you, you taking your time to come here today to write to the board, share your comments during today's meetings, and that's all I'm allowed to say today. So thank you. We now move to item I, reports. Do I have a motion to receive and file the reports that have been included with the agenda under item I?
Move the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes. Okay, we move to item J, work session. Work session item 1 to demonstrate overview and tax view of the GIS system applications. Uma Marquez will give us that, along with David Ray, with the GIS systems manager. Uma is our information technology director. Momentarily, the board will recess to the third floor for the work session. However, before doing so, I would like to move that the board go into a closed session upon the completion of the work session, and that will move us to item K, the closed session. So at this time, pursuant to the Code of Virginia, I move to go into closed session pursuant to Code Section 2.2-3711A5 of the Code of Virginia for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the businesses or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facility in the community. Specifically, the board will discuss potential business location or expansion in the Catawba Magisterial District. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hooker?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes. The board will now recess to the third floor for the work session and the closed session.
Far from Mapuche territory in southern Chile. The game ends, and everyone on the field runs in to hold the final ceremonial chant. Coach Soto Antiguao says it was a great game. They lift their sticks high and beat them together. Not just one side, but everyone on the field, united together. For The World, I'm Michael Fox.